Hello, this is the Progressive Cynic, and in this video I'll be discussing the right-wing activist group, which spent over $250 million in 2012, yet nobody knew about it before last week. Last week, Jim Vandehei and Mike Allen of Politico revealed the existence of a conservative activist organization which gathers money from pro-corporate and conservative donors in order to redistribute it to needy conservative activist groups. It acts as an intermediary for this money and a central distribution center to control which groups get which funds from which donors. It does not do its own activism, but it amounts to the central bank for conservative activism in the United States. They've given over $250 million in the last year or so to a variety of groups, including $115 million to the Center to Protect Patient Rights, an organization which basically acts as a medical and pharmaceutical company lobbying organization, and has absolutely nothing to do with protecting patients or their rights. Also, the Americans for Prosperity, Koch brothers organization, received $32.3 million. They call themselves Americans for Prosperity, but they really support prosperity for the few and lower government services for everyone else. I mean, they're very happy to hand out bootstraps, but that's pretty much the full extent of their compassion towards those who are less fortunate than the average millionaire. The 60 Plus Association received $15.7 million. Now, the 60 Plus Association is a seniors advocacy group which supports the destruction of entitlements, the privatization of Social Security, and the reduction in Medicare. In short, they're a pro-free market lobbying group which wants to decrease the benefits that elderly people get in service of helping the really rich keep more of their money. These are just a few of the incredibly Orwellianly named organizations which have received money from the equally Orwellianly named Freedom Partners. Now, there are two shocking things about this, the existence of this organization. First, we have an organization which is spending $250 million, yet was able to completely escape notice. That's unbelievable. I mean, politics is now a big money business. After Citizens United, corporations became involved, and elections suddenly exploded in the amount of resources which are required. They're actually billion or multi-billion dollar affairs, but $250 million by one group is not a small amount. The second issue which this raises is the massive and blatant misclassification of many of these political organizations as trade associations or non-profit issue advocacy groups. Now, in order to prevent any of its donors from having to disclose their donations, Freedom Partners is classified as a 501c6. This means it is a trade association, like a carpenters association. Only instead of supporting a bunch of carpenters, it supports a bunch of rich people and corporations in their attempts to buy our politicians. I suppose you may consider that a trade, but it's a blatant misuse of the legal status that comes from the 501c6 filing. Now, a 501c6 does not require any disclosure. And, it doesn't require any disclosure on who is giving money to the organization. It requires you to disclose who the organization is giving money to, and that's how we know about the recipients of this money. But we don't know whether or not the money which is being distributed by Freedom Partners came from rich Americans, or maybe multinational corporations, or perhaps foreign governments who want to do some lobbying in favor of a trade contract. It's shocking, and it amounts to, it turns our elections into little more than an auction. If you have the money, you can buy a seat at the table, and you can throw your money into one of these giant pools in order to gain a bit of influence on the resulting winner of an election. Worst case scenario, you indebt a whole bunch of the losing party to your interests, and you're able to stall things until you can mulligan and try again to take control of the entire government. Now, unfortunately, there's almost nothing we can do, because, well, the IRS it's being absolutely negligent in its job. They need to crack down on these blatant electioneering and political advocacy organizations, which are masquerading as issue advocacy and social welfare groups. It's simply a misuse of tax classifications, and it allows these huge aggregates of corporate and just wealthy interest group money to donate themselves anonymously to any number of political entities. Now, the media has absolutely failed in this regard. Yes, the Politico reporters did a very good job in exposing this organization, but the mass media has largely ignored this entire situation. I've seen it on Politico, and I've seen it on a few other less mainstream sites. But other than that, the media has basically ignored the fact that a secret organization that may or may not have taken money from overseas interests is trying to buy our elections, and is willing to spend many, many hundreds of millions of dollars to do it. You need to remember that the $250 million sum was just for one election cycle. We do not know how much they are willing to spend or have spent in the past. We also do not know whether or not this is a unique organization. It is entirely possible that there are several other secret, let's call them slush funds, for political activism. It's an absolute mess, and we can't do anything without at least some cooperation with the IRS and some cooperation by the Supreme Court. This all stems back to the idea that money equals speech, and it is worsened by the fact that speech can now be actually utilized by corporations in order to influence politicians. I'm referring to the Buckley v. Vallejo and Citizens United Supreme Court cases, which are an absolute disaster, let's face it. We live in an era of legalized corruption, where secret money buys politicians in back rooms, and it turns our democracy into a sham. We may vote for someone, but then they get bought off, or a bunch of other dumb people are tricked into voting for the other guy because that other guy has huge corporate backers who are able to put down millions of dollars in support of someone who will do their bidding. Look, I've done some work with a group called Wolf-Pack, wolf-pack.com, and I would suggest that people check that out. It's a nonpartisan campaign finance reform group trying to get a constitutional amendment banning money in politics. Or get involved with any other organization that is trying to achieve the same goal. Move to Amend is another good one. It really doesn't matter what political orientation you are. You can be a conservative, or a Democrat, or a liberal, or a Republican. Unless we get money out of politics and prevent these secret groups from spending huge amounts of money in buying our politicians, nobody's vote matters. This secret money corrupts the system, and it will eventually result in the formation of a corporatist plutocracy. Those with money, corporations, and rich people, buy the system, and we become excluded. If you don't want to use the 99% language, okay, that's perfectly fine. But the fact remains that it is the 99% who are going to be left out in the cold. And that 99% includes Republicans and Democrats. Thank you. This has been The Progressive Cynic.